The clock on the marble mantelpiece ticked softly in the vast sitting room, where 8-year-old Elliot lay curled on the velvet sofa, his small frame barely making an impression on the cushions. Claire knelt beside him, her weathered hands gently adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the manicured gardens of the Blackwell estate stretched endlessly under a grey October sky. Elliot's breathing was shallow, each exhale a reminder of the doctor's words that still echoed in everyone's mind. 1 month, maybe less. But in this moment, Claire wasn't thinking about time running out. She was thinking about the way Elliot's eyes still lit up when she read to him, the way his fingers still reached for hers when he was scared. She was thinking that love, real love, doesn't count days. Claire had worked in the Blackwell mansion for 3 years, but the past 6 months had transformed her from housekeeper to something deeper. When Elliot's illness took its turn for the worse, she became his anchor. She researched gentle remedies, kept detailed notes in a worn journal, tracked what helped and what didn't. The medical team was cautiously supportive, acknowledging that comfort mattered as much as medicine. It was working, too. Despite the grim prognosis, Elliot had stabilized, his pain manageable, his spirits lifted. But Vivian Blackwell had been watching, and her observations came with cold calculation. The 42-year-old second wife understood power came from appearance and position. Elliot's prolonged illness disrupted her carefully ordered world. Claire, with her too close bond with the boy, represented a threat Vivian couldn't tolerate. If the child was going to die anyway, Vivian needed to ensure the aftermath left her exactly where she belonged, firmly at Harrison's side, indispensable and unchallenged. Harrison Blackwell had built an empire on ruthless intelligence, but his son's illness brought him to his knees. At 47, grief had carved new lines around his eyes. He loved Elliot desperately, but money couldn't fix this. The rare degenerative condition destroying his son's body didn't care about his billions or his connections. He had married Vivian 2 years after his first wife Caroline died, seeking someone to manage the social obligations he found exhausting. But Vivian never bonded with Elliot. There was politeness, not warmth. Harrison told himself it didn't matter, that Elliot had him, that love could come. Now, watching his son slip away, he realized how many nights he'd chosen the office over the nursery, how many times he'd relied on Claire to be there when he couldn't. The mansion itself seemed to hold its breath. Fresh flowers appeared daily in Elliot's room, arranged by Claire's hands. Every detail of his care had become ritual, a way of holding back the inevitable. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything shattered. Claire was preparing Elliot's smoothie in the kitchen, the same berry blend with ginger she'd made dozens of times. She stepped into the pantry for honey, and when she returned, Vivian stood over the counter, photographing the ingredients with her phone. Maria, the cook, froze at the far end of the kitchen, sensing danger. "Do you have medical training, Claire?" Vivian's voice was ice. "Are you licensed to give supplements to a dying child?" The questions came rapid fire, aggressive. Claire's stomach clenched. "Dr. Reynolds approves everything. It's all natural, things that help Elliot feel better when—" Vivian cut her off, voice rising loud enough for James in the hallway to hear. "Natural? Herbs from some downtown shop? How do you know they're safe? How do you know you're not killing him?" She snatched Claire's journal from the counter. "This looks like someone playing doctor. This looks like negligence Harrison needs to see immediately." Within 20 minutes, Harrison's car pulled into the drive. Within 30, Claire stood in his study, her journal spread like evidence while Vivian paced, voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "Harrison, Claire's been experimenting on Elliot. This morning after her tea he had a terrible episode. Breathing labored, heart racing, severe distress. Dr. Reynolds had to stabilize him." Claire's heart plummeted. "That's not true. Elliot was fine. I gave him chamomile, the same tea approved dozens of times. He was comfortable when I left him." Harrison's face was ashen. Dr. Reynolds is upstairs now. Vivian called him because Elliot had respiratory distress. He said it could be a reaction to unregulated supplements. Each word landed like a blow. Claire looked at Harrison, willing him to remember 3 years of devotion. Please, I need to see Elliot. Check my records. I would never hurt him. He's like my own son. But Vivian moved closer to Harrison, hand on his shoulder. Perhaps you've become too emotionally involved, too willing to try anything. My stepson nearly died this morning, Claire. The common factor is whatever you've been giving him. Harrison's voice was heavy with exhaustion and fear. Claire, gather your things. I won't risk my son's life. If there's even a chance something you're giving him is making him worse, I have to remove that risk. The finality was absolute. Please, Claire whispered. Let me see him. Let me explain to Dr. Reynolds. Don't just believe. Harrison held up a hand. I've made my decision. James will drive you. 2 weeks severance. But you leave today, and you don't contact Elliot again. Understood? The walk to her room felt surreal. 20 minutes to pack 3 years into suitcases. She wanted desperately to see Elliot, but Vivian blocked the hallway outside his door, arms crossed, expression triumphant. Through the partially open door, Claire heard monitoring equipment, but not Elliot's voice. Say goodbye to your meal ticket. Vivian whispered. You thought you could replace me. You're a housekeeper. You were always just a housekeeper. The cruelty was naked now, and Claire understood with terrible clarity that this had been planned, that Vivian had made Elliot sick this morning just to remove her permanently. James drove her to the Sunset Motor Lodge in silence. When Claire sat on the sagging bed in room 17, surrounded by cigarette smell and water-stained ceiling, the tears came in waves. She'd lost everything. Worse, Elliot would wake confused, be told she'd hurt him. A child with 1 month to live, told the person who loved him most had been poisoning him. The injustice suffocated her. She knew Vivian had done something that morning, had caused that crisis and blamed her, but proving it seemed impossible from this grimy room. The Blackwell mansion felt heavier without Claire. Maria tried to help when she could, but Vivian handled everything with cold efficiency. No warmth, no comfort. Elliot had been told Claire's remedies made him sick, that it wasn't safe for her to be near him. He cried until exhausted, refused food, turned his face to the wall. Harrison tried to explain, but his words felt hollow. How do you tell a dying child the one person who made him feel safe was dangerous? Elliot looked at him with enormous, betrayed eyes and whispered, Claire would never hurt me. Never. Then he closed his eyes and wouldn't open them again. Dr. Reynolds filed his report noting possible reaction to herbal supplements, though the timing was unusual and the boy had shown no previous sensitivity. His notes stated carefully that he'd reviewed Claire's preparations and found them appropriate, that the sudden reaction was unexpected given Elliot's history. But he also wrote that removing unregulated supplements was safest, that the family's decision was understandable. The report was ambiguous enough to cover him professionally, while planting tiny seeds of doubt about Vivian's narrative. Harrison wasn't looking for doubt. He was too consumed with fear, too desperate to eliminate any threat, too willing to trust his wife because questioning meant facing his own failure. Vivian moved through the house, consolidating her position, ensuring she was indispensable. She'd covered her tracks carefully. The ipecac syrup she'd slipped into Elliot's tea that morning, just enough to cause respiratory distress and vomiting, had done its job perfectly. The empty bottle was gone, disposed of miles away. Evidence pointed exactly where she wanted, at Claire's amateur interventions, and everyone had accepted the narrative without question. Claire spent 3 days cycling through shock and grief before determination took over. On the 4th day, she washed her face and began planning. She had $273, no prospects in a town where the Blackwell name controlled everything, and no family nearby. but she had truth and stubborn Pennsylvania backbone. She called the house, only to be told she wasn't to contact the family again or face legal action. She called Dr. Reynolds' office, but his receptionist said he couldn't discuss patients with former staff. She walked to the mansion gates, but security said he'd call police if she tried to enter. The desperation was visceral. She drove past at odd hours, hoping to glimpse Elliot's window. She got documentation from the wellness shop proving she'd been careful and knowledgeable, but without access to medical records, the papers felt useless. Her money dwindled. Job callbacks dried up when employers learned she'd worked for the Blackwells and left under unclear circumstances. At night, in that motel room, she replayed that morning endlessly. Elliot had been fine after his tea. She'd sat with him, read to him for 30 minutes. He'd been peaceful, breathing steady. Then Vivian appeared in the kitchen, and an hour later Harrison was being summoned for an emergency. The timing felt too convenient, too perfectly aligned. Nate Morrison was 31, a lawyer on the Blackwell legal team who read footnotes and caught inconsistencies others missed. He'd grown up poor, put himself through school on scholarships, understood what it meant to be dismissed by power. When Vivian called him to handle Claire's termination, something nagged at him. She was too prepared, too insistent everything be processed quickly, without senior partners asking questions. Medical negligence was serious, usually involving police reports and investigations, not quiet firings. When he mentioned this, Vivian's reaction was sharp. "Harrison doesn't want this public. The scandal would be devastating. We're handling this internally. I expect your discretion, Nate." Her certainty, her control of the narrative, made his instincts prickle. 2 weeks after Claire's departure, Nate heard Elliot crying upstairs, heard Vivian's sharp, impatient voice telling the boy to stop being ridiculous, to be quiet. The tone made his skin crawl, the way you might speak to an annoyance rather than a dying child. That night, Nate pulled Claire's file again and read carefully. Dr. Reynolds' report was professional, but buried in clinical language were inconsistencies. The crisis timing didn't align with chamomile metabolism. The symptoms described, acute respiratory distress and nausea, looked more like certain poisoning than allergic reaction. Reynolds noted he found no traceable tea in Elliot's system when he examined him an hour later. Odd if the tea caused the crisis. The report read like a doctor unconvinced by the explanation, but unable to prove of alternatives. Nate also found Claire's employment record showing only excellent reviews, no complaints, 3 years of dedicated service. Medical logs showed Elliot's condition had actually improved during Claire's primary care, that her attention had measurable positive effects. None of it matched Vivian's picture of a reckless amateur. Nate knew he was crossing professional lines, but conscience wouldn't let him ignore what he saw. Finding Claire took 2 days. When he knocked on room 17, the woman who answered looked aged a decade. Her eyes were red-rimmed, clothes hanging loose, posture defensive. "I didn't hurt Elliot," she said immediately, starting to close the door. "Please leave me alone." Nate held up his hands. "Ms. Hayes, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm Harrison's attorney, but I'm here on my own time. Something doesn't add up. I think you deserve to tell your side." Claire let him in. Over 2 hours, she told him everything. About Elliot, their bond, how she'd researched every supplement, kept detailed records, consulted Reynolds regularly. She showed him her journal. Nate saw immediately what Harrison missed in his panic. Careful notes from someone who tracked details because she wanted to help, not someone reckless. Claire told him about that morning, how Elliot was fine after his tea, how Vivian appeared with strange intensity, how the emergency happened so quickly and conveniently. And she told Nate something that made his blood run cold. Days before her firing, she'd seen Vivian going through the medicine cabinet, pocketing something small. Claire hadn't thought much of it then, but now the memory felt ominous. "I believe you," Nate said finally. Claire's eyes filled with tears at those 3 words. But belief isn't evidence. I need proof solid enough that Harrison has to listen. Ms. Hayes, are you willing to help me investigate? It's risky for both of us. But if we're right, if we can prove Vivian hurt Elliot to frame you, maybe we can get you back to him before... He didn't finish. They both knew the deadline was ticking. Claire sat straighter, hope kindling. Whatever it takes, I need to clear my name. But more than that, I need to protect Elliot. If Vivian hurt him once, what stops her from doing it again? Nate worked methodically. He met with Dr. Reynolds under the guise of preparing legal documentation. When he pressed gently about inconsistencies, Reynolds paused, troubled. Off the record, something didn't sit right. The symptoms looked like acute poisoning, not herbal reaction. But when I suggested a full toxicology panel, Mrs. Blackwell was very firm it wasn't necessary, that we knew the cause, that more tests would be cruel. Mr. Blackwell agreed. I didn't push it because, well, it's delicate. The admission confirmed Nate's suspicions. He hired private investigator Sarah Chen, paying from his own savings. He gave her 2 tasks: track Vivian's movements and purchases before Claire's firing, and dig into Vivian's finances. Sarah was efficient. What she uncovered was damning. Vivian purchased ipecac syrup from a pharmacy 30 miles away 3 weeks before Claire was fired. Paying cash under a fake name Sarah traced through security footage. Ipecac induced vomiting and respiratory distress. Exactly Elliot's symptoms. Vivian had also contacted lawyers about estate planning, asking detailed questions about inheritance when minor beneficiaries died before majority. The timing suggested planning and premeditation. Most damning were Vivian's financial records. She was nearly $2 million in debt, money borrowed against expectations of Harrison's wealth that hadn't materialized. Harrison was rich but careful, and Vivian's access was limited. However, there was life insurance on Elliot worth $5 million with Vivian as beneficiary, taken out 8 months ago. Caroline's trust had a clause. If Elliot died before 18, significant inheritance reverted to Caroline's sister, Vivian's college friend. The 2 women had gone into failed business together years ago, leaving both in debt. If Elliot died, that debt would be erased, and both would profit substantially. The picture was clear. Powerful financial incentive to hasten a death already coming and remove anyone who might interfere. Claire tracked down Vivian's ex-husband, David Crenshaw. Reluctant at first, his resistance crumbled when Claire explained. "She almost killed my mother," he said bluntly. "My mom had Alzheimer's, lived with us. Vivian was supposed to help care for her. But Mom started having episodes, falling, agitated beyond normal symptoms. I found out Vivian was changing medications, not giving right pills, sometimes double doses of sedatives. When I confronted her, she denied everything. We divorced shortly after. I made sure Mom went to a facility Vivian couldn't access." He looked haunted. "Is she doing something to Harrison's kid? Because you need to stop her. She's patient and smart, and she doesn't understand other people are real the way she is. They're obstacles or tools." Maria became their inside source, terrified but determined. Nate approached her carefully with just enough evidence to be credible. Maria broke down crying, admitting she'd sensed something wrong but hadn't trusted her instincts. Now she paid attention. What she reported was chilling. Vivian gave Elliot medications herself now, insisting no one else handle them. But Maria noticed Vivian crushing pills that shouldn't be crushed, giving medications at odd times that didn't match Dr. Reynolds' schedule. Elliot was declining faster, sleeping constantly, barely eating, his skin grayish. Maria snuck a photo of Vivian's bathroom cabinet. A pharmacist friend examined the image and identified several bottles that weren't prescribed medications, but over-the-counter supplements, dangerous in combination with Elliot's prescriptions, things that could suppress breathing or cause cardiac issues. Evidence was mounting, but Nate needed something undeniable to break through Harrison's defenses. They needed to catch Vivian, or have someone with unquestionable credibility speak truth Harrison couldn't ignore. The answer came from Elliot himself. It was a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Claire was forced out. Maria texted that Harrison was home and Vivian was out at a charity function, hours away. Nate made a reckless decision. He drove Claire to the estate, talking past security with legal authority and audacity, claiming urgent documents needed Harrison's signature. They walked in like they had every right. Maria met them in the foyer, eyes wide and frightened, whispering directions to the study. But before they reached Harrison's office, they heard sounds from upstairs, strange thumping and a child's weak voice. Claire froze, every instinct screaming to run toward that voice. Nate grabbed her arm. "Wait, let's see what's happening." They moved quietly to the staircase and looked up to see Elliot dragging himself down the hallway toward the stairs, one hand on the wall, portable oxygen tank abandoned. He was so thin, so fragile. He looked like a ghost. But when he saw Claire below, his eyes blazed with intensity. "Claire!" he gasped. She ran up the stairs, forgetting caution, catching him as his legs gave out, gathering him into her arms like he weighed nothing. "Oh, baby, oh, sweetheart, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here now." Claire whispered through tears, feeling his heart racing, his breathing labored and painful. Elliot clung to her with surprising strength, small hands fisting in her shirt. "I knew you didn't hurt me. I told Daddy, but he wouldn't listen. Claire, Vivian's been doing something to me. She gives me things that make me feel worse. I hide pills sometimes, and when I do, I feel better. But she watches now, makes sure I swallow, and then everything goes dark and bad." The words tumbled out desperately. Harrison, who'd heard the commotion, came out of his study and stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, face draining of color as he listened. "She told me if I said anything, Claire would never come back. She said Claire was in jail for hurting me, that if I caused problems, Claire would be in trouble forever. So I stayed quiet. But Daddy, I can't anymore. I'm so sick, and I don't think it's just my disease. I think she's making me sicker." Elliot's voice broke. "She didn't know I was awake sometimes. She talked on the phone, said it would be over soon, that she just had to be patient, that then she'd have everything. I didn't understand, but it scared me. She scares me." The room tilted. Harrison gripped the banister, knuckles white, and Nate watched comprehension dawn, horror replace confusion. "Elliot, are you telling me Vivian's been giving you things that make you sick, hurting you on purpose?" Elliot nodded, still clinging to Claire. "She thought I was asleep, but I heard her." Claire looked down at Harrison, expression fierce. "Your son's telling you the truth, and we can prove it. Vivian poisoned Elliot the morning I was fired. She used ipecac to make him sick, then blamed my teas. She's been systematically harming him for months because she benefits financially from his death. We have evidence, witnesses, documentation, but right now, what matters is getting Elliot to a hospital for full toxicology before Vivian comes back." Harrison moved then, taking stairs 2 at a time, reaching for his son with shaking hands. "Give him to me," he said, voice breaking. Claire transferred Elliot carefully. The boy looked impossibly small against Harrison's chest. "I'm sorry," Harrison whispered into Elliot's hair. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I should have listened. I should have seen. I should have protected you." He looked at Nate, expression hardening with fury. "Call Dr. Reynolds. Medical team here immediately. Comprehensive toxicology testing. Call the police. I want detectives here when Vivian returns." Then he looked at Claire, guilt profound in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for what I put you through. Please, will you stay? Will you help us? Elliot needs you, and I clearly need someone I can trust." The next hours were controlled chaos. Dr. Reynolds arrived with a medical team, drawing blood, running tests, examining Elliot thoroughly. Police came, 2 detectives listening with grim expressions as Nate laid out evidence. Claire showed journals. Maria gave tearful statement. They searched Vivian's rooms and found a locked box containing medication bottles, some prescribed to Elliot, but most not, along with her own journal documenting what she'd given the boy and when, tracking his decline like a scientist monitoring an experiment. Financial documents, correspondence with her sister, emails discussing insurance payout and trust reversion, a paper trail removing any doubt about motive. When Vivian returned at 6, she walked into a house full of police, medical personnel, and a husband who looked at her with cold fury. "Harrison, what's going on?" Her voice was carefully concerned, but her eyes calculated escape routes. Harrison stood blocking her path, body vibrating with rage. "Elliot told me what you've been doing. Claire came back. My son told us everything. The police found your journal. They found the medications. They found the financial documents. It's over." Vivian's face transformed, shock giving way to cold calculation, then contempt. "He was dying anyway," she said flatly, casual in a way that made everyone go still. "All I did was help nature along. That woman was in the way. She made him comfortable, hopeful, and that dragged everything out. I did what needed to be done." Detectives moved forward, one reading rights as the other moved to handcuff her. Vivian didn't resist, but she looked at Harrison with something like pity. "You're a fool. You could have moved on with someone who understood your world. Instead, you'll waste time grieving over a child who's dead either way, just weeks later than if I'd been efficient." The cruelty, the absolute lack of remorse, made Harrison's jaw clench. "Get her out of my house before I do something I'll regret." They led her away, heels clicking on marble, back straight and unrepentant. When the door closed, Harrison seemed to collapse inward, all adrenaline draining. Dr. Reynolds emerged an hour later with preliminary results both disturbing and hopeful. He has significant levels of several substances that shouldn't be there. Benzodiazepines at sedating doses, antihistamines suppressing breathing, even traces of ipecac. The combination's been suppressing respiratory function, increasing pain, making him feel much worse than his condition accounts for. Good news is no permanent damage I can detect. If we clear his system and return to appropriate care, he should feel significantly better. He's still very sick. The underlying condition is terminal, but he may have more time than we thought, and that time can be much more comfortable. He looked at Claire with respect. "Your herbal preparations were actually helping, counteracting some of what Vivian was doing. Your records will be very helpful." Relief swept through the room, tears and laughter mixing. Harrison reached for Claire's hand, squeezing with desperate gratitude. "Stay, please, not just tonight, but for however long Elliot has. Live here, be with him, help him have whatever time remains." Claire looked at this man who'd failed catastrophically, but was trying desperately to do better. "I don't want your money. I never did this for money. I did it because I love him. So yes, I'll stay as long as he needs me." She went upstairs where Elliot slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Face relaxed, breathing easier. Claire sat in the chair that should always have been hers and took his small hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm never leaving again. You're safe now." The weeks that followed mixed healing and acceptance, legal proceedings and medical care, grief preparation and unexpected joy. Vivian was charged with attempted murder, child endangerment, fraud. Evidence was overwhelming. The media descended, but Harrison used his resources to keep Elliot's identity private. What mattered was Elliot's remaining time. With poisoning stopped and Claire's care resumed, Elliot rallied in ways that surprised Dr. Reynolds, gaining weight, spending more time awake, experiencing less pain. Doctors cautioned this wasn't cure, the degenerative disease was progressing, but they'd bought time, maybe months, a gift beyond measure. Claire moved into a suite near Elliot's room. They fell back into old rhythms, reading together, working puzzles, talking about everything. Elliot asked questions about death sometimes, gentle inquiries about what came after, whether his mother would be waiting, whether it would hurt. Claire answered honestly but hopefully, holding his hand, telling him love continued beyond death, that Caroline was waiting, that when the time came, he wouldn't be alone or afraid. They made memory boxes filled with drawings and photos and treasures for Harrison to keep. They wrote letters to the future, messages about how to grieve and remember and keep living. And they simply spent time together. Quiet companionship of two souls who'd found each other and refused to waste what remained. Harrison changed, transformed by guilt and gratitude. He cut back work dramatically, spending mornings and evenings with Elliot, learning to just be present. He and Claire developed tentative friendship, two people bound by love for the same child. He paid Claire's debts, set up a trust fund, offered permanent position with salary that acknowledged her value, showed his son that people who give love deserve honor. He started therapy, working through grief and guilt and anger at himself. Maria was recognized for her courage, given a raise and apology. Nate was quietly promoted, his instincts and ethics noted. Christmas came, likely Elliot's last, and they made it magical. Lights and a small tree in his room. Gifts opened in bed, simple things bringing joy. Harrison read the Polar Express, voice breaking but pushing through. Claire made hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows. They watched movies, sang carols in cracking voices. In the evening, Harrison climbed into bed beside his son for the first time in too long, holding him gently while Claire sat nearby, and they breathed together. "This is the best Christmas ever," Elliot whispered, and everyone chose to believe him. Time moved differently when you knew it was running out, each day endless and too brief, each moment ordinary and sacred. January brought cold winds and gradual decline everyone could see but pretended not to notice. Elliot slept more, woke less, clarity growing shorter and more precious. Dr. Reynolds visited almost daily, adjusting medications, ensuring comfort, gently preparing them for the approaching end. Claire read even when Elliot seemed asleep, her voice a constant presence, connecting him to the world he was slowly leaving. Harrison held his son's hand for hours, memorizing the feel, treasuring every breath. They told Elliot they loved him constantly, wanting him absolutely certain he knew. And Elliot, in lucid moments, told them he knew, that he wasn't scared, that he was grateful, that he was ready. The end came on a grey morning in late January, peaceful in the way everyone hopes for. Elliot woke briefly as dawn filtered through curtains, looked at Claire, and smiled. "Hi, you're still here." Claire took his hand, squeezing gently. "Always, sweetheart, always." Elliot nodded, satisfied, and closed his eyes. His breathing slowed over the next hour, each breath shallower, and Claire called softly for Harrison, who came running, who climbed into bed and gathered his son close. They held Elliot between them as he slipped away, passage so quiet that for a moment they weren't sure it had happened, until Dr. Reynolds gently checked and shook his head. "He's gone. He's at peace now." The grief was enormous, overwhelming, but underneath was strange gratitude that they'd been given the chance to say goodbye properly, that Elliot's final weeks were filled with love instead of fear, that justice had been served and truth spoken, that the people who loved him most had been there at the end. Elliot's funeral was small and private. They buried him next to Caroline, a small white coffin that seemed impossibly tiny. Harrison spoke, voice breaking but steady, about a son who taught him what mattered most, who'd been braver than any child should have to be. Claire placed her journal in the coffin. So you remember how much you were loved. Others shared memories, tears, laughter at stories. And when it was over, when the coffin was lowered, they walked away, changed, marked permanently by love and loss. In the months after, Harrison and Claire both struggled differently. Harrison established the Elliot Blackwell Foundation, dedicated to improving palliative care for terminally ill children, funding research into rare diseases, training professionals in recognizing medical abuse. He gave speeches, raised money, turned pain into purpose. Claire was quieter, volunteering at children's hospitals, sitting with sick kids whose parents couldn't always be there. She found meaning in being present, in using what she'd learned to make difficult times bearable. They stayed in touch, bonded permanently by the boy they'd both loved. A year after Elliot's death, on what would have been his 9th birthday, they met at the cemetery. Spring had come, bringing new growth despite grief. Claire stood before Elliot's gravestone with its simple inscription: "Beloved son, brave heart, forever loved." Grass had grown in, daffodils Harrison planted were blooming yellow, a bird sang in nearby trees. Claire knelt, placed fresh blue irises. "Hi, sweetheart. I brought your favorites. Things are good. I'm helping other kids now, just like I helped you. I think about you every day. Your dad's doing better. He's making such a difference. You'd be proud." She paused, wiping tears. "I miss you so much. But I'm grateful, too. Grateful I knew you. Grateful I got to love you. Grateful we fought for you and won, even if not forever. You taught me things about courage and love I'll carry always. Thank you for letting me be your Claire." Harrison appeared with his own bouquet. They smiled at each other, sad but genuine, and stood together before their shared loss. "He'd want us to be happy," Harrison said quietly. "He told me near the end. He didn't want us sad forever. He wanted us to remember good times and keep living." Claire nodded, linking her arm through his. "Then we'll try. For him. We'll keep living, keep loving, keep fighting for kids who need us. We'll make sure his story meant something." They stood as spring sun broke through clouds, warming their faces, and both felt something shift. Not healing exactly, but a loosening of grief's tight grip. Recognition that life continues, and honoring the dead means living well, loving deeply, never forgetting what matters most. They walked out of the cemetery together, carrying Elliot with them the way you carry all profound love, as part of your story, woven into who you are, permanent and precious, and proof that even brief lives can change the world if they're witnessed by the right people, loved hard enough, and remembered well.